This video came about because I was searching the internet to see if I could find a simple tennis bracelet. I just wanted the 3 beads, the 2 outside, and then the crystal in the center, and I couldn't find any kind of pattern that would do this, and I was trying to figure out what kind of beads and crystals to use. So I decided I'd try it myself using a simple peyote stitch. But where it became a little more interesting was trying to figure out what crystals to use and what thread to use. I'm using the number 8 fire line. I did try it with regular gold beading thread, but the gold beading thread does not stay tight enough. So I wasn't happy with the results with the gold beading thread. I stuck with the fire line. And as far as the crystals, I usually use the Precosia crystals, but I wanted something that would be a little bit smoother. So I ended up with the Czech 3mm fire polished crystals. So these 2 bracelets that I've made and the one we're going to make is the Czech fire polished 3mm crystals. So using the number 8 fire line for thread and the Czech fire polished crystals and the outside gold and silver are 80 Miyuki round beads. I frequently use delicas, but this works up better with a round bead. And then a clasp at the end. And during the video, I'm going to show you how to do the stitch to make the bracelet. We will have to add some thread at some point because I've used 2 arm lengths, but I found that towards the end, you still have to add a little bit more thread. And then I'll show how to attach the clasps. So let's get started with the normal peyote stitch. So we're going to pick up 1 bead and we'll pick up 1 crystal and 1 bead. And we're going to slide them down to the end of our thread. Now leave a good bit of tail, so probably, what's that, maybe 4 to 6 inches, because we're going to need this, the tail part, in order to put the clasp on. So we'll take the first 3 and we're going to come back up, go past the first bead and go down into the crystal and the second bead and pull that down. And this should now look like this. I've turned it around a little bit so you can see what it'll look like. I prefer to work up, going up. So I'm going to turn this, and you can work going either up or down. Your next bead is going to go on, and you're going to go through the crystal and up through the one of the first beads that you put on. Having a little difficulty. I grabbed that first crystal. I wanted everyone to see up through this bead. Now this one will this one will slip down, the one by my thumb, until you get the bead you're putting on right now secure, and then it will stop. One that you're putting on will stop it from slipping. So now your piece should look like this. And we're going to come back through this top bead and you want to try and keep it rather taut, and you're going to pick up a crystal and come back down, pull it taut, and you'll have your first 2. Now this is just a repetition of 3 steps. It's only 3 steps that we're going to do. We're going to take a bead, we're going to go, the first one goes up through the crystal and through the bead right above it. Now the second one I'm going to put on. I'm going to take the bead, go through the crystal, and I want to go through this bead. So whether you go down this way, the way I'm pointing, or whether you turn the piece around, as I said, I like to work up, turn the piece around, and go up through the crystal and through this bead next to it. The reason we have to do this is because we have to get the thread turned around in order to get the third crystal put on. So we're going to pull this up. Here we go. We have to come back down to get to the last bead to be able to add the crystal. And then we add our crystal going this way. And do give a good pull to make sure your thread's taut each time so you don't get a lot of looping thread up across the top. I'm going to do this a couple more times, and then I'll come back after I've got further down and I'll show you how to add thread. When you've run out of thread, we'll probably get down about 3/4, and we're going to have to add some more thread to continue. So let me just do a couple more. And again, the first, when you have 3, 3, and 3, your first stitch is going to go through the crystal and straight up to the bead above. And then I like, as I said, turn around, and now we have 4 across the top and 3, so we've got to add another bead, and we go through the crystal through the one, not the end, but the one next to it. And then come back down on top. So now we're at the end, and now we can add another crystal. This particular combination of seed beads, the 8-0 and the 3mm fire polished, comes out nice and smooth. You can see it's nice and smooth and even, and it really produces a wonderful looking tennis bracelet, very rich looking tennis bracelet. And this will this whole process will go very quickly. I'll return when I get more of the beads done, and then we can talk about, I'm going to hold this. It's a little easier when you hold it this way, but I was trying not to do that initially so that you could see how it was being put together. So we have the one, we're going to do one more, and I'll do it downwards so you can see how that goes. You go down. If you don't want to flip it, you can go down here and come down. Make sure you pull them tight, and then you go back to the end bead. Get my tail out of the way. Go back to the end bead, and then pick up another crystal and add your crystal. And that's what it should look like. Again, keep tightening those that thread every time you put a bead on. I've beaded to the end of my thread now, and I've gotten about 4 inches done on the bracelet. I only have this much thread left. So what I did was I just pulled the needle off. We're going to come back and we're going to weave that into the bracelet, but we're going to weave it into the new section because we have to use the old section to start with the new thread that we want to put on. So I don't like to have both the old and the new thread overlapping. So I'm going to pick this up. I've put about another 2 arms length worth of thread. You could probably use a little bit less, but at least 1.5 arms. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back 4 beads, and I'm going to go through a bead, a crystal, excuse me, I'm going to go through a crystal. And I want my tail to come through that crystal, because when I cut it, if it pulls up a little bit, it'll still be inside that crystal. I don't want thread hanging out inside the, or hanging out from the bracelet. So we're going to pull it until you have about this much. You just need a little bit, just need enough so that when you go to cut it, you can pull it up and cut it. And we'll do that in a few minutes. So the next thing I want to do is I want to find the thread that's right here. It's when you put the bead in, there'll be a thread connecting this crystal and bead. So I want to find that thread. I'm going to go underneath it and pull this. I'm going to make a little knot so that this doesn't shift, okay? So before I pull the loop tight, go back through the loop. So I have my little loop. I'm pulling this, and now I'm going to hold on to this tail end so I don't pull it completely out. I'm going to make a tiny little knot. Right here. So you can barely see it. That's the point. And we're going to go back up through the bead. Okay, I want to pull this little tail out. And now I want to come back down. And I'm going to come back down through this second bead here. Sometimes these will loosen. And I'm going to come back through this, the bead underneath it. And I still want to keep this one, the old thread taut. I'm going to go back up this way through the next 3 beads. Okay. So now, and if you pull on it, you'll see that this little tail thread's not moving. So now you've attached a new piece of thread that is nice and secure. I'm going to pull this up with my little scissor, up, nip, and now you'll see the thread's sort of retreated, should have retreated. You might see a little tail end, but it should retreat into that bead so it comes out nice and clean. Now we're going to put a couple more rows on before we get rid of the old tail. So we're at the point now where we have to start the row again. So we're going to take a single bead, we're going to go up, and then we'll flip it around, and we're going to come back through that bead, go to the one, not the end, but the one next to it, come back up. And it is a little annoying for a few minutes where you've got to keep them both tight. It's more important to keep the new thread tight because this one will tighten when we're going to tie it off. Come down. Okay. I'm going to do one more after this, and then I should have enough to be able to tie off the old thread. Oop, I made a mistake. I picked up, as you can see, I picked up 2 beads. So I'm going to have to go back through here and take one off. Do that one again. Start tight. I could feel that when you start to do a bunch of these, you'll be able to feel that little gold one in there. You can feel the feel the mistakes with your fingers. You don't have to necessarily see them right away, but it always is good to check visually. And especially now, because once we tie this other thread off, we're committed. Whoops. All right, now I'm going to put this down for a minute, and I need to get another needle. I might use one of my shorter ones this time because I didn't leave a lot of thread here. So see if I can get one of my shorter needles through here. All right. So again, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to come out before the last bead because I'm going to do a little knot like I did when I started. So I want to come out before the first bead and I want to go underneath and through the bead. My tail's a little long here, so let me just pull. Oops, I pulled it right off. Well, so long as I have that loop, I can do this with my fingers. And then I'll put the needle back on. All right, so I'm putting this through the loop I just created and I'm pulling it tight. A little unorthodox, but still works. I'm going to put this back through the needle. Now we're going the same direction we were going, which was up towards the bead. And since I'm going to be working on these two, I don't want to use the very end to finish this off. I'm going to actually come back behind here and come back down this way through my crystal. And then I can cut it off. So I can come back this way. And then I can cut the one thread. And now we're going to continue. I've just added my extra long thread and now I'm going to continue for a 7.5 inch bracelet using the clasps that I am. We need 6 3/4 worth of length. So we're currently sitting at 4.5. So I'm going to have to add another 2 1/4 of length in order to get to the point where I want to put my clasps on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I want you to go ahead and do that yourselves. And I'll be back when I've gotten the bead finished and show you how to do the clasps. We've reached our 6 3/4 inch length for our 7.5 inch bracelet. And now we're going to put on the clasp. I selected clasps that would lay flat on the wrist. I didn't want something that would be bulky, so when you put your hand down, you'd be feeling it. So these clasps, if you notice, also they have little rings here that are flat. We would have to put a jump ring in if we wanted it to lay flat like this to connect it to the bracelet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a bead instead, and I'm going to show you how to connect the bead in here to the clasp so that it will lay flat and it won't twist. So let's, okay, get rid of the tape measure, which I just spread my beads all over when I did that. All right, pick up a bead. You want to have the two beads coming out as if you were going to put a crystal there, but don't. So at this point, we're going to use a bead and insert the clasp. So we're going to go underneath. Doesn't matter which side you start with, but we'll go underneath and pick up the clasp. And we're going to bring this all the way down. And I'm going to go back around, kind of like when you do earrings. Go back around through the bead and through the end bead this way. So when I pull it tight, it'll form a nice little circle. And this will get tighter when I get when I come round again. So I'm going to come back round again and do the same thing. I'm going to come back down here. Down. I'm going to come down the bead next to the one I just came out of. Keep tightening. Come back through the crystal. We've got to come back round in the same direction because we want to loop that again one more time. Excuse me, I can't see at that angle. Back through the crystal. Now it's tightening up because I got to get a couple more loops in there. Back through the end bead. We're going to go through the end bead here. Now we're in the right direction. So the reason we went to the bead underneath the crystal next to the end bead is we have to be in this direction. And we're going to go back up through this bead that we added at the end. And now we're going to come back down underneath the clasp and back through this bead and into the end. And we want to tighten that up again. And you can do either 2 or 3. I'm going to go through one more time, which means I have to go through here and through the crystal. And then I'll go through the end. Now I did I went around twice with the red and 3 times with the blue. So I'm just going to follow and do 3 times, and we're going to go back up. And we'll form a very nice, strong connection up through the bead. I'm going to go back under, pick up the clasp, through the bead one more time. Yeah. Through the bead next to it. And now we're going to end off. So I have nowhere to go other than the bead next to this. So I'm going to go through this bead. And we're going to make that little loop knot right here. So we can go under, pick up the thread, make that little loop, bring the needle back through and pull that tight. I like to hold both sides as I pull. And now we're close enough, rather than go through this bead yet another time, I'm going to go down through this bead, through the bead next to it. So we're going to go down through this bead next to it, and instead of coming out the one here, we'll go 3 in. So we'll go in because we haven't gone through those before. And then again, we can go into the bead next to it and up with the crystal. And I'm just going to make another little knot here just to make sure that this thread stays. And then I'll go up to this. Well, actually I can go right back down through the crystal. It's going to go up through the bead, but I won't add the additional thread. So we'll go right back down through the crystal and then come out with the bead where the bead is, and then we're going to go back up through this bead crystal. And there are any number of ways. If you find a way you'd like to do it better, by all means. But now I've secured the one side, and again I ended a crystal so that when I pull this thread up and clip it and it relaxes, it should go into the crystal slightly. Now I'm going to keep this connected so I don't put the clasp on in the wrong direction. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you've got it going in the direction that it's supposed to go. So I need to take the thread off this needle, and I'll thread this one. We're going to do the same thing that we did a minute ago on this side. So I have 2 beads up, and I'm going to need one bead. Oh, excuse me. We have 2 beads up, but I'm coming out the wrong direction. So in order to come out the right direction, I'm going to have to go to the bead next to it and go down and then come back around, because we need to be coming inside. Now I can take my bead and I can go through the bottom of this clasp and see. Okay. So this is all, wanted to show and make sure that this is all going in the proper direction. We're going to go back through this bead, through this end, and we've got to pull it down there tight. And now we go back in. We have to come back around in the right direction. So we come back around this way, pull it tight. We go through this bead. Now we're in the right direction, going in the right direction. We go back into the bead we just put on with the clasp. And we'll go underneath the clasp, back through the bead, back through our little anchor bead, and then over to the side. Now this was 2. If I'm going to do 3, I have to go back round like I did a minute ago and make sure I come back in the right direction. Come through the bead one more time. This is the last time. Through the bead. Now through the clasp. This is why you want to leave enough thread. I'm starting to run out, but I think I'll make it. If not, I'll get the smaller needle. Through the bead again. So this is our last time. Last time through the corner. And now we're going to come down here and we're going to do our little knot. So we're going to pick up a thread, pick up that thread. Oh, I have to be careful because I am losing my thread. And we're going to go back. Not going to make it. So what I'm going to do here, let me take this off, and I'm going to do what I did before. I'm going to thread this through the loop with my fingers, and I'll tighten it up here, and I'm going to get my smaller needle. So I have a shorter, I keep a couple of short sewing needles on hand, so I can get my shorter sewing needle. and thread that up. Right. This will be a little bit easier now because we still have to go through a couple of beads. So I'm directly under this one, so I'm going to come back under the gold because I don't want thread to show. And I'll come back, so sometimes you have to look and see, just look to see where you are. I'll come back here, we'll go straight down. I'll come back up here, one more. Now I do want to put one more little knot in, which we did on the other side. So I'm going to come up under a thread. It should not be as visible. So we'll come up the crystal so I can, there we go, I can cut. So now you can see that it's pretty much disappeared. And that's what I was going for. I wanted everything to disappear so that you didn't see thread knots and threads sticking out and all sorts of things that we don't want to see. And we've completed our tennis bracelet. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. And thank you for participating.